Who's the rudest celebrity you've ever met? The rudest celebrity I ever met was Jack Nicholson. I asked him for an autograph, and he growled at me that he only signs autographs for chicks with huge tits. Flip side, nicest celebrity I ever met was Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead. I was at a bar, and he sat down beside me. I was in awe and stammered out, "Let me buy you a drink." He said, "Nah, you can't do that." I was a little dejected and hung my head. He immediately burst out in laughter and said, "Kid, I'm a goddamned rock star. Let me buy you a drink." I then spent the night with Lemmy buying me Long Island iced tea while we talked about 60s British science fiction. I used to live in the same city as Tommy Lee Jones, and there was a point in time where if you worked in the service industry, you either had your own story about him or knew someone who did. I have a few of my own. Celebrity or not, he is, hands down, one of the rudest people I've ever come across. Very demanding and hateful. He looks down on service workers and treats them like shit, but at the same time expects them to simultaneously 1. Know who he is 2. Not acknowledge who he is, but 3. Give him special treatment because of who he is. I hung out with Charles Barkley once in Philly, and for some reason he took a liking to me and was very candid and open. He told me you have to be nice to every single person you meet, and it can be exhausting, but if you meet 100 people and are nice to 99, but not to 1, then that one will bash you and tell everyone what a terrible person you are, and people will believe them. Awesome guy. Got a call to David Spade's room at like 2 a.m. because he had issues with his Wi-Fi. When I told him I couldn't fix it and he had to wait for ID. In the morning, he said in the most deadpan David Spade way, "I figured you wouldn't be able to fix it. I didn't figure they put their best and brightest on the graveyard shift." El Mail. My husband worked for a very popular ski resort and got to meet a lot of celebrities. He said Leonardo DiCaprio was one of the rude ones to staff and a stingy tipper on huge bills. On the flip side, he said Adam Sandler was actually really nice and pretty generous on tips. Edit. I'm not going to debate if tipping is right or wrong. That's not the point of the question. Adam Sandler purposely plays golf by himself a lot of the time, so he can be put with other random golfers. Apparently, he's really nice on the course and just enjoys chatting and golfing with strangers. Naturally, does a lot of filming in Toronto and Vancouver, like many productions do, so he's been spotted at many courses if he has time to golf. Imagine you and 2 friends are golfing, and they randomly put Adam Sandler with you? Haven't met too many celebs, but I gotta say that Bill Nye the Science Guy was the rudest. I grew up in Seattle, and I ran into him with my dad when I was really young, and he was setting up for a shoot for that show down on Alki Beach. I was a huge nerd, and he was one of my heroes because of that show. My pops told me to go say hello, so I did, and Bill responded something along the lines of, "Get out of here, kid. We're busy. Where are your parents at?" And I pointed at my pa across the beach and was like, "Right over there." Bill told me to leave him alone. I was devastated. Mind you, I was like 6 or 7. On the other hand, I met Woody Harrelson and Willie Nelson on separate occasions when I was a bit older, 22 or 23, and living on my own in Maui. They were both super nice. They were both stoned, as was I, when I met them. When I met Woody, I was working at Manna Foods stocking shelves, and Woody walked down the aisle I was stocking. His eyes were squints that were red as hell, and when I saw him coming, I just said, "Hey, Woody, how's it going?" And he responded, "Hey, what's up, man? It's good. How are you?" We had a little conversation before he got back to what he was doing, and I got back to work. It felt like a genuine chill meeting with someone I respect. Stephen Baldwin and Chad Michael Murray both tried to get stuff for free and pulled the "Do you know who I am" for something that was $5. Baldwin also gave his number to a teenage co-worker, and we called it to see if it was real, not even thinking about caller ID. He spent the next year randomly calling her. My favorite celebrity encounter was making a smoothie for Gordon Ramsay. He was super nice and said he would be back later to get his friend something. The friend was David Beckham, who was also super nice, and they stayed and took pictures with everyone. Justin Timberlake. We were staying at the same hotel, and he wouldn't let my elderly grandmother on the elevator with him and 2 others. He stuck out his hand and said no, and closed the door. On the other hand, Jessica Biel, who was in the restroom, was very friendly and talkative to my little sister while they were washing their hands together. My grandmother asked later, "Who was that asshole?" I laughed. I interned at a music management company in college, and one of the clients was Meatloaf. I answered the phone, and he asked for his manager. I told him the manager was on a call, and he started screaming, "He's on a fucking conference call? Are you fucking kidding me? I'm Meatloaf." You know what? Fuck you. Then hung up. As a 19-year-old trying to get into the music industry, my face went white, thinking my career was over. To his credit, the manager, who had a famously bad temper himself, walked over to me, told me that Meatloaf was a buffoon who nobody respected anymore, and to not worry. Ralph Nader. I was his PR representative once. He's arrogant, condescending, rude, and demanding. Otto. I also represented Martin Sheen at one time, and he was the nicest, kindest, warmest person I have ever met. He knew he was being hosted by a nonprofit, so he insisted on paying for his own rent car rather than let them get him a car and driver, and after his event, he insisted on taking his entire local PR team to dinner and picked up the tab. When he left, he publicly thanked me and shook my hand. BJ. Novak. I used to cook/bartend at a local dive bar when I was in college. He came and did a comedy set for the students. He bombed. It was awful. After the show, I went in for the late-night shift. As I'm standing there behind the bar clocking in and getting ready to head back to the kitchen, in walks BJ and sits down at the bar looking completely bummed. Our main bartender goes over to talk to him. He sneered at our menu and asked for things that he knew we would never have. This was where the broke college kids and even more broke townies drank. The fact that we offered more than one vodka was a miracle. He finally picked something, and the bartender asked to see his ID. Keep in mind that this is a college town bar. We carded everyone that ordered a drink, regardless of how old they looked. There were signs saying this in about 8 different places. BJ lost it. He completely blew up on our bartender, cussing him out and saying things like, "Do you know who the fuck I am? I'll buy this place," and fire the whole fucking staff. Our bartender knew exactly who he was, but was quick enough to say, "You look like some sort of off-brand Seth Meyers. Either show me your ID or get the fuck out." He did eventually show his ID and went to sit in some corner. Every now and then he'd make a rude comment to a server walking by. When he tried to order another round, the bartender cut him off and kicked him out. Dennis Hopper didn't smile once or make eye contact or tip. Not even after he forgot his cell phone and it had to be kept under guard for him for 6 hours. Not even a thank you. Crushed me. Best, Billy Zane. I pull out the Billy Zane story every chance I get, so I'll spare you the long version this time. That guy was a legend. Hung out us the entire night and came out again the next week just to hang out with us some more. No surprise, but Bill Cosby. A few months before all the allegations came out, he did a show at the place I worked at. He refused to do sound and lighting checks or even leave his dressing room before the show. When the show started, he came out and berated the sound and lighting guys for about 15 minutes until it was to his liking. It wasn't like a humor thing, it was him basically yelling and the text while the crowd kind of looked on in horror. He was also a huge dick to all of us crew. My bosses took their job seriously, because on a small show like that we might make $5K in profit after all the bills were settled. We had pictures in our lobby of all the past performers. Cosby had performed before, but a few days after the show, we took down his picture in the lobby. On a side note, someone stole the picture of Bill Clinton we had hanging up. Zac Brown Band was probably one of the nicest groups to come through while I was there. Was nice and respectful to all us local crew, and even invited some of the students that were in the building on stage during sound check to get autographs and hang out for a few minutes. R. Kelly. He and his entourage were at the casino I bartended at and sat at my bar for hours playing the bar slots and drinking Henry VIII like crazy. Racked up a $50,000 tab. They left a mess and gave a $15 tip at it. Louis XIII. Pregnancy brain, hitting hard, and I'm like some king with a number, woman facepalming light skin tone, woman facepalming light skin tone, woman facepalming light skin tone. Rudest by far, Toby Keith. Absolute bag of fuck to deal with, and then would flip the switch to patriotism pornographer when the cameras were on. He was a running joke for anyone who had to deal with him in the service industry. Nicest though, Sir Paul McCartney. I delivered his dinner to him, and I have zero expectations in these situations other than a guy who is hungry wants room service. He answered the door and told me to come in, proceeded to have about a 10-minute conversation where he couldn't have come across more genuinely interested in my life. I felt embarrassed, which I don't normally, but we had a quick chat. Talked about a good place to get a coffee in the morning, and he shook my hand telling me what a pleasure. I have to believe there are thousands of stories about that man in that regard. A relative of mine had an interesting interaction with LaToya Jackson. He was in the same elevator as her in another country. She didn't think he spoke English, so she started talking trash about how dumpy the country was and how much she hated the fans in that country. Then my relative asked her, "So, do you ever go back to Gary?" Apparently the look on her face was priceless. Met all of Destiny's Child when I was younger at a restaurant with my dad. Michelle Williams was the rudest, most disrespectful person I have ever met in my life. Signed my book and nearly threw the book at Kelly to sign. Also refused to answer any of my questions. Young me was heartbroken because she was my favorite. Beyonce was such a sweetheart, true class act. I signed my book and gave me a nice conversation. Also held my baby sister just because my sister smiled at her. She said, "Now I have to hold her." Fun fact, my sister's name is Ivy, so it is a joke in my family that's where Beyonce got the name Face with Tears of Joy, Face with Tears of Joy. Kelly Rowland was also super nice and sang a little. She got me ice cream, so I loved her and always will face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy. I worked in entertainment for a while, so I've met dozens of A-list celebs and like 1,000 one-hit wonders. Celebs themselves are usually pretty cool. It's their random-ass entourage and family members that think they matter who get really annoying and treat you the worst. Usher was the opposite. His label people were cool, but he was a diva. Nicest celeb I've met. Matt Ryan, the QB. For sure. Spent a whole day with him. Dude talked to everyone and made sure everyone was included and had a good time. One of the most fun work days I've had. This was during 2011 lockout, I think. I can't say it was him, because it was whoever was trying to set up the reservation for him, but the rudest interaction was Neil Patrick Harris. They tried to reserve the private room at the restaurant I managed at the time, and got told no, it was already reserved that evening. The person making the reservation gave the whole, "Do you know who this is?" and got super pissy when the 16-year-old girl working the host stand told them honestly she had no clue who that was. He seems like he's such a prick. I've not been a fan of his since I saw the awful Amy Winehouse Halloween platter he did. He's gross. It's neck and neck between Demi Moore and Robert Duvall for me, but I'll tell the Robert Duvall story. He was in Jacksonville filming part of Days of Thunder, or Staying Here, related to the movie circa 1989/early 1990. I was 10 years old. My family and I were out to a rare for us dinner at one of the nicer restaurants in the Jacksonville Landing, RIP. My dad, a huge Godfather rSlash 2 fan, immediately recognized him, leaned into the table, and excitedly but quietly said to my mom, "That's Robert Duvall, from The Godfather." He saw my parents look over and made a nasty face, waved the waiter over, and whispered something to him. The waiter shook his head, and Robert Duvall became visibly angry and slammed his fist on the table. The waiter said something back to him and shook his head again, and then Robert Duvall stood up, threw some money on the table, and left. I can only assume that Robert Duvall was an incredible asshole to the waiter before we got there, because the waiter later came over with a bottle of wine for my parents and said, "Compliments of Mr. Duvall." He overpaid. On the way out, my dad and the waiter chatted for a few minutes. And on the way home in the car, my dad told my mom that Robert Duvall tried to get us kicked out because my dad recognized him and he didn't want to be bothered. All we did was look in his direction. Not me, but my sister ran a coffee shop in London, and it was James Corden's local. Apparently, every staff member thought he was a total dickhead. He scoffed at my sister for, and I quote, "Yeah, you know who I am," then walked off when she asked for his name. She was like, "Yo, WTF?" to a coworker, and the coworker told her who he is, and that he's a wanker. Rihanna. I worked at her show as a stage builder. We got instructions from the tour manager that we were not allowed to look at her, speak to her, and we had to give way to her if she was walking in our path. A former colleague of mine that was pushing a huge crate down a corridor blocked her path, and she acted like a complete child. Tom Cruise. I worked security for Top Gun, the original, at an AS Miramar. He was arrogant and rude to everyone, including officers. Being rude to fighter pilots is a bad idea. Refused to dress properly to dine in the officers' mess. He got into a huge confrontation with some of the higher-ups and almost got the entire movie crew thrown off of the base. Put his foot through the side of a Tomcat because he wouldn't listen to the plane captain telling him how to properly get in the aircraft. No one wanted to drive for him or be his escort. Goose, Anthony Edwards, on the other hand, was an amazing person and everyone loved him. I've encountered a lot of mid-level authors in my line of work over the past 20 years, and something about that not wildly famous, but not completely unknown level of notoriety just brings something sad and desperate and nasty out of them. One of the more notable ones was Winston Groom, author of Forrest Gump and a bunch of other books. Dude gave us a small rural public library, a writer beforehand like we were expecting John Grisham or Nora Roberts. When he showed up and we were like, sorry, we couldn't match all these demands, he was just really an asshole about it and talked shit about the area we lived in during his presentation and Q&A. I smoked weed with Huey Lewis and some of the news. They were playing a show at a casino, so we went earlier in the day to gamble a bit before the show. My buddy lost all his money quick, so we wandered around for a while and saw the band getting set up for the show. We watched for a minute until Huey happened to come out. He thought we were just lined up super early for the show and invited us to the back. It was all outdoors, so behind the stage. We lit up and hung out for about 20 minutes. Huey was awesome, very friendly. But one of the news, no idea which, this was almost 20 years ago, was an asshole for no reason. Then we left so they could finish getting ready. We didn't have upfront tickets to the show, but between songs, Huey noticed us and called us up right to the front saying something like, "These guys have been here's all day, true fans." It was awesome. Many years ago, I had a chance meeting with actor Sean Penn in Paris. It was late night, and he was all by himself at the hotel bar in the lobby. I I happened to be in the bar as well. I recognized him, just approached and said hello and told him that I admired his work. He asked me to take the seat, and then we spoke about things for about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe more, but I don't remember as I was in absolute awe of a major Hollywood star. He was polite and seemed interested in my views as he listened to them. I felt like I could have stayed for some more time. However, I thought it's best not to overstay my welcome, so I got up and I thanked him for his time and left. Over the years, I have read accounts and anecdotes of people on the internet, which makes me think Sean is a recluse and a grumpy guy. So I thought I should share a rather pleasant experience with him. Who knows, maybe I caught him on a good day, lol. Justin Bieber. My family was staying at a beach resort in Capri. My sister and I got up early to walk on the beach. This guy and his entourage came out of nowhere walking on the beach. They said all the guests had to leave. A few guests went and asked the front desk about this, and they said a VIP had requested the beach for himself the whole day. I was like, are you kidding? We found out later it was Justin Bieber. His entourage was so rude too. Met Steve Allen once, and he was a total POS. Forgot about it, decades pass. Then I'm in the theater with my wife watching the Elvis movie, and they made a much bigger deal than the story really warranted about Steve Allen being a condescending asshole to Elvis. After the movie, I was thinking about it, and I realized that someone probably held on to their own Steve Allen experience for decades and put it into that movie, lol. I have posted this a few times, and do so again here. Henry Winkler's story. I was a 12-year-old boy in NYC. I'm a huge Fonz fan. Fonz poster, Fonz lunchbox, Fonz t-shirt, etc. Block party on West 90th Street, and who do I see walking but Henry Winkler? I run up and say, "Please, Mr. Winkler, can I have an autograph?" He's still walking, turns quickly to me and snarls, "Get away," and keeps on walking. I stood there stunned. A nice woman who was with him stops and asks for my address. I go home and take down that Fonz poster and tell my mom I don't want a t-shirt anymore. 2 weeks later, a signed 8x10 of the Fonz shows up in the mail. I looked at that glossy for a long time before I tore it up and threw it away. 100% true. I'm an adult now, and get people have bad days. I know people who have worked with him, and they say he is a fantastic human being. But 12-year-old me will never forget. John Elway. 2 shitty encounters that demonstrated just how full of himself he is, and growing up in Denver have heard many more similar stories. He came into the pizza restaurant I worked at in high school on a busy Friday night and pulled staff aside and said that we had to let all the other customers know that he was there, but wouldn't be signing autographs or talking to fans. Then a few years later, was at a Bon Jovi concert in Denver, and he and his entourage were in the row in front of us. They showed up 10 minutes after the band started. They stood in the aisles, took their own time sitting down and moving out of everybody's way, then sat down the entire show and talked loudly and barely paid attention the entire 2.5-hour show and left early, again taking their time and blocking everybody's view as they gathered their things and left. Fuck John Elway. He drunkenly made a scene at a swim team meet when my older sister beat his daughter. He loudly accused my sister of somehow cheating, and his friends had to calm him down and pull him away. The swimmers were all like 12 years old. I was an extra in a movie starring Matthew McConaughey. He made sure every single person on and around the set ate lunch, had enough to drink, and was comfortable. After shooting every day, he pretty much rented out a bar/restaurant, and everyone ate and drank free. He also took the time to make sure he had a conversation with everyone, no matter the importance of the role you had on set. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.